Oh, welcome to another episode of The Grove. Thank you to our partners, Craze and Friends, Clean Tech Growth Lab. Without them, it would not be possible to interview awesome people doing awesome things like Rob. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be
Yeah.
here.
So, like I was saying, two things. First thing, I love the color palette that you're bringing today. It's very foresty, very green. Makes me happy, and we'll just get right into it. I think if anyone that's listening is familiar with your content online, it's very engaging. It's very interesting, thought provoking about empowering people to take control of the knowledge, how to better understand the relationship with nature, economy. The thing that caught my attention was a post about soil health. I'm very interested in stuff like that. Um, you know, but before we get into it, if you could give a brief introduction of yourself and what you're
Sure.
building.
So I'm the co-founder of Fifth World. I'm the chief engineering officer, and prior to that, I spent the last, I guess that started just pre-COVID. So about 15 years before that, I've been teaching permaculture, taught about 10,000 people around the world. And then before that, I was working in the oil and gas industry. So I'm a former petroleum engineer. I was the guy that brought natural gas and oil to the facilities. Then I designed the facilities so that we could all heat and drive cars, heat our homes and drive cars. And then prior to that, I'm actually Charlie in the chocolate factory. I grew up in a cake factory. We made about 100,000 cakes a day. And so if you map that out really quickly, I grew up in industrial food, moved to industrial energy, and then transitioned to teaching about decentralized food, energy, and water. And Fifth World kind of emerged as a result of working on a property in British Columbia, Canada, who happened to be owned by, it happened to be owned by the co-founder of Ethereum, who was interested in scaling up regen globally because he saw the need for it. And so Fifth World kind of emerged out of this idea that maybe there'd be a way to bridge the atoms and the bits, and then use some of those kind of primitive crypto protocols to give a lending hand or enable or empower or grow regen in a really meaningful way. And so Fifth World kind of started with that idea. We started off as a venture studio for about 3 years, tried a bunch of different stuff out, which we can talk about in the podcast, and have kind of finally landed on this current niche, which is, I'd say, an intermediate step to our longer term mission of planetary regeneration within a generation. And so right now we design and build, the easiest way to think about it is off-grid homesteads, but they're more than that. Basically, systems that provide autonomous food, energy, water, and resilient shelter.
So I do want to get into the beginnings of Fifth World and your experience with that. But first, I'd like to get a deeper understanding of what regen means to you, and then also dig a little bit into your past. So if we could just start with regen, if you could
Sure.
explain that in a little bit more detail.
I think to understand regen, you have to kind of understand the three paradigms that coexist right now in society. And so the first paradigm that I refer to is the conventional paradigm. So this is business as usual. How do we maximize GDP growth? How do we maximize shareholder value? Not that any of those things are necessarily bad, but they are very narrowly focused. And you can kind of summarize the conventional paradigm into how do I get more stuff, without acknowledging that the more stuff actually requires not accounting for the negative externalities that are created as a result of creating the stuff. So
Okay.
if we think about kind of emissions coming from cars, the automotive industry functions, at least the conventional one, with the understanding that they have free access to use Earth's atmosphere as a landfill. If they actually had to pay for that landfilling service, transportation would be very different. And we can look at pretty much any industry. I mean, I don't know what you guys pay for tippage out on the East Coast, but in Alberta here where I live, it's like $17 a ton. It costs $17 to bury garbage forever, which is basically nothing. And so that's the conventional paradigm. The sustainable paradigm is one that I grew up in, kind of started in the late 80s, early 90s. And I would argue that the sustainable paradigm is actually an end state and not a current, like a state that we should be aiming for right now. The best kind of joke that I've heard about this is that if you came to me, Blake, and said, "Hey, Rob, how's your marriage doing these days?" And I said, "Oh, it's pretty sustainable," you'd probably feel pretty sorry for me. And so, what are we actually sustaining? Are we sustaining dead zones? Are we sustaining degraded rivers, degraded soils, food with no nutrient in it? What is it that we're actually sustaining? And there's actually a more pernicious problem with the sustainability movement, which is one that you've probably thought of but have never put words to, and I suspect your listeners are the same. And it's a deeply embedded guilt. And if you kind of dig into it, it's like this idea of net zero, zero escaping, reducing your footprint. If you kind of draw those out to their logical conclusion, you end up with the only feasible option. Basically, it's saying that humans are inherently evil. Actually, that's kind of what it's saying, and the only way to deal with that problem in their paradigm is to get rid of all the humans, which is not very positive, and we kind of all sense it in the posts that we read on a daily basis, but we don't really put words to it because it's so uncomfortable to think about. And then the last paradigm is the regenerative paradigm, which can be summarized as, if the most negative thing that we've done on Earth is a nuclear bomb, what's the most positive? And it's not just some hopeful kind of, unicorn and fairy dust idea. It's actually, there's science behind this concept of what it means to be just as positive as we are negative. And the best way that I can explain this is to kind of talk a little bit about the beaver. So I live on a 160-acre farm. We have 2 creeks. We have about 8 beaver families that live on our property. And to the untrained observer, when I go for a walk in our forest, with an untrained observer, they say, "Wow, these beavers are just destroying your land. Like, look at all the trees they're cutting down, and they're making a mess of this place. Like, that used to be this beautiful forest with these old trees standing up, and now it just looks like chopsticks all over the place." And what's actually happening there is that the beavers are creating a disturbance. Disturbance is the word that we use in ecology. So they're like Newton said, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So they're creating a disturbance. The trees that they cut down, they use to build their dams. They also eat the layer that grows just underneath the bark, called the cambium layer. That's what their nutrition comes from. And as a result of damming up these 2 creeks on my property, every time a beaver creates a beaver dam, they increase the background biodiversity by 28 times. So we have more birds, we have more mammals, we have more amphibians, we have more of everything, more plants, as a result of the water harvesting that these beavers do. And so every species on Earth, whether it's humans, whether it's woodpeckers, whether it's foxes, we all have an impact. We all have a footprint. And so the first thing that we have to do in the regen space is acknowledge that you're not getting rid of your footprint. It's like Newton said it best: every action is an equal and opposite reaction. And so what we can do, though, is we can understand our place within nature, because we are just one of nature's species, and we can understand how we can take the disturbance that we create, the footprints that we leave behind, and ensure that that we're actually creating 28 times the productivity, just like the beaver, as a result of the actions that we take. And we currently don't think about that right now. Right now, it's about, how do I mine or extract or attain at the expense of, without thinking about any of those negative externalities. But if we actually include those negative externalities in the design thinking from the beginning, we can make systems that are more profitable, that ensure that humans actually will be here in 7 generations, and that ultimately our well-being is, our mental health is better, our physical health is better. It's a very self-interested thing to do. And this is one of the barriers that I think people have against the environmental movement in general, is that it comes across as sacrifice, but actually it can be mutually beneficial.
Got it. That was beautiful. Thank you for walking through that. So just to summarize what I have, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the 3 overarching the paradigms to understand the framework of regen is, first, the current state of things is just, like the sky is a landfill, and we don't pay we don't pay for that. That's not factored into the way that we think about building inside of the economy. The second is that the narrative, which I'm glad that you brought up, And I'm glad that's part of this framework. The narrative of climate change and sustainability so far is overwhelmingly negative. And then the third one is that we can not only think about it as positive, but think about it as expansive. And if that was taken into account in the design phase, it would really change a lot of the ways that we
Yep.
ended up designing things. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Plus, there's the self-interest piece. Like, I think that people assume that if you care about the environment, you're not a self-interested person. But I actually would argue that the most self-interested people are actually care deeply about that, especially if you have kids or you are thinking about future
Sure.
generations.
Got it. So it can be selfish.
Yeah.
And if that's helpful. Okay, cool. So thank you for lining that out. The next thing that I wanted to get into that you touched on it. It's part of your experience. So you started in industrial food.
hmm
If you could talk about how that impacts, how that experience impacted and how you shaped your understanding of the industrial food complex for other people to understand, and how it relates to this conversation that we're having about regen.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up when Walmart was just becoming a big thing, like as it was scaling rapidly, and the result of what Walmart and Costco and Kroger and a lot of the big grocery chains have done a lot to shape both consumer experience, consumer pricing, like what do we expect food to cost. So they've really encouraged the mass, like an even larger version of industrial food, because in order to be able to compete in those arenas, you really have to build massive amounts of automation. So less humans, more pumping, more pipes, more processing, and ultimately, like we had a 40,000 square foot facility. Like I said, we made 100,000 cakes a day, and at some point, as I was growing up in that, I realized that I didn't really want to eat food that had traveled through multiple miles of pipe before going into an oven. And then you couple that with books like The End of Food by Thomas Pollock, or Googling, the Great Nutrient Collapse, and it starts to become really apparent, at least from the manufacturing side, why our food is harming us. Once you add in the farming element and you start understanding how we're growing our food, like this creates so much cognitive dissonance inside of me still today, even though I've been in the space for 15 to 20 years, is that we use hormone disruptors and toxins on our food to stop, quote unquote, pests from eating them. And then we consume that same food. And keep in mind that the hormones in your body are operating at parts per billion. And like we're spraying these en masse on our crops. And so you start with sick food, and then you run it through these giant machines that make it more sick or more unhealthy. And then you wrap it in plastics, and now we have a microplastics issue. So having that like big food experience really kind of painted how much of a dead end our current food paradigm actually is. When it'll change, who knows? Like, it's a really big ship to turn around.
Sure.
And I would say that the people that are like, there's a small group of people, I would say, that are kind of waking up to it. I see a lot of these influencers on LinkedIn, for example, like doctors, functional medicine doctors saying, you got to eat healthy. But the piece that's still missing in most of the health influencers that I see is that nobody's actually talking about where to get the food. It's like they're acknowledging that the food's bad, but it's like, well, where does it come from? And that's the gap that I'm trying to fill right now at Fifth World, and then have been actually for almost 20 years.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. You alluded to my next question. So before we get into the experience with the oil and gas and stuff, because that's a very interesting perspective, is within this framework that we just discussed, where the narrative is typically negative and it can be turned to be positive. If there's somebody listening that isn't too familiar with regen, but obviously can get behind, like, hey, the food that I'm eating is not great for me, like, and there's alternatives that could be better. How could someone like that think about it? Like, how could someone like me think about that? Because I shop at, the big stores and things like that. I mean, I have smaller stores, that I guess I would say I split time, but I still don't know where that food is coming from, and I'm just eating it. So, what's a positively slanted way to think about this?
Yeah, well, and that's a great question because it's the aggregate of the individual life decisions that lead humanity in the direction that it goes. And I think one of the reasons that people get disenfranchised with the environmental movement is it's all guilt and no solutions. But like we are every meal that we consume has the potential to either create positive or negative externalities. We get to make that choice 3 times a day. And if enough people do that, the whole system transforms from the ground up. And so, someone living in a city, the easiest, lowest effort option you have is going to farmers markets. Get to know your farmers, and there's plenty of them around. As people go to more people go to farmers markets, more farmers will emerge because the market will encourage that type of behavior. If you are shopping at a big store, Whole Foods is definitely better than maybe other ones. And if you are trying to choose foods that are healthy for you, generally speaking, staying out of the middle rows and walking around the outside of the store where your basic ingredients are. Like one big step, if you're not willing to go to a farmer's market, is actually just start to cook. Start using base ingredients, like start from vegetables, minimize the plastic on them. Go back to using spices again. It's crazy to me, Blake, how many people have these high-end kitchens and that they live off of Skip or whatever Uber Eats. They're just like a status symbol now that never gets used. And it's like, start to learn to cook. And then once you learn how to cook, then you can go out and get some more exotic ingredients. And ideally, you're getting these from farmers that have harvested them within the last 24 hours.
Well, I have personally, as somebody that just I guess a lot of the people that eat my food can say that I cook for survival. But one of my go-tos is you throw a bunch of veggies in a pan, or sorry, in a pot, and then you throw diced meat in it, and then you put the top on, and you could pour broth or water depending on how
Easy.
saucy you want it, and then you leave it.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite meal that you guys make? Just choose one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really big fan of very, very simple meat dishes, and so salt is your friend. So if you have a steak or a roast, you put more salt on it than you think you should. And then literally, if it's beef, I let it sit on the counter all day long with a lid on it, so my cats don't eat it. And the salt changes the proteins. Actually, there's a process, I can't remember the name of it now, but it actually like transforms the meat. And then I just barbecue it or pan sear it for 5 minutes aside. And then same thing with the vegetables, like sauerkraut or steamed vegetable. I mean, it's very, very simple fare, but if you're starting with good ingredients, you don't need these crazy barbecue sauces and all this other stuff. It's just the flavor is actually in the food. It's not in like most people don't know this, but ketchup and barbecue sauce, it's got a pretty heavy vinegar component in it. It was designed to hide food that was going off.
Oh.
It's not actually. So it's kind of like it's like Febreze. Febreze kills the sense in your nose, so you can't smell. Like barbecue sauce and ketchup is actually a failure to cook, not the opposite. Because if you're starting with good food, you don't need to add all these different things to it. It's like the flavor is in the food itself.
Yeah. Good. Well, I will do that. That is the salt, the beef, leave it out, put a top on it. I will implement that. So now I want to get into just pivot quickly to your villain arc, the one where you were in the oil and gas industry. So if you could talk about your experience there, because regardless of what people like to say about it and how it contributes to climate change, fossil fuels and stuff, it is critical infrastructure and it supports everything that we have today, for better or worse. And so, it's a huge industry. It's really important that it still functions. It's important that we transition away from it, but it is an important piece of our infrastructure. So what is it that you did? What was your experience, and what did you ultimately take away from it?
So it's not the villain arc actually at all. I'm sorry to ruin your story. Actually, it might make the story more interesting. I think the oil and gas industry is it is the most important industry in the world, actually. I'm just going to state that because we burn, so a barrel of oil has about 5 years of human labor in it. So if you think of it as like bottled human labor, it's equivalent to 5 years of human labor, and it's like $55 a barrel today, I think. So if you take the average working year of 2,000 hours and you divide that or multiply that times 5 and then divide it by $55, you're going to get a per unit labor that's like fractions of a cent. We have equivalent of 400 billion energy slaves working on Earth today. So every single one of us has more laborers working for us 24/7 than like the most rich Egyptian ever did. Because this energy does so much work for us. So I was the guy cutting down all the forests, bringing in the pipelines, building the facilities, and I didn't like cutting the forest down. That's the part that really irritated me. But I couldn't criticize the industry as a consumer. Like, I needed the natural gas to heat my home. I needed the oil to drive my car. I love the fact that I can fly at 30,000 feet and 800 kilometers an hour and get to Europe in 11 hours. That's incredible. Like, that trip would have taken months, maybe even a year to get to where I am right now, to Europe, just with like horses and canoes and, sailing ships. Like, it's an amazing resource that we have. I do think we use it really irresponsibly. For example, like, we shouldn't heat houses with natural gas. Like, burning a 1200 degrees Celsius fuel to heat a 21 degrees Celsius house, that's like 2000 Fahrenheit to 72 Fahrenheit. It's like cutting butter with a chainsaw. There's way better ways to heat our buildings, and we should use the resource a little bit more effectively. But I wanted to be part of the solution for what happens after oil. And I don't think there is an after oil, actually. I think that oil needs to continue to be used for making plastics, pharmaceuticals, like durable things, that the mineral is so universal in what it can be used for. We need to find higher value things than just heating houses and running cars on it. Like, there's other ways that we can do those things that are more that will ensure that civilization has a better future. But that doesn't mean the oil industry ends. There's lots of oil left in the ground. It's just there may not be lots of oil for us to use it without being intentional.
So then how did your experience building those facilities and getting context into how that industry works, how did that inform your the section of your career that was mostly teaching?
So everything in the world is energy. If you think about the sun drives all processes on Earth. It even actually is the reason that we have oil in the first place. And I do believe that we're running out of cheap oil. And I think that even though that's kind of funny to say today, when oil, there's a 5 million a barrel per day glut right now in the world, that could change really rapidly with any of the geopolitics going on. We are kind of at the end of our cheap oil. And in the next 2 to 3 years, we're probably going to see irreversible declines. And I'll just say that, like, predictions are for charlatans, and all of my predictions are guaranteed to be wrong. But as a general rule of thumb, like, if we look at the fact that it took millions of years to get it into the ground, and we're going to have burned it up in about 100 to 150, that's not a very responsible use of that resource, something that's basically just bottled sunlight. And so, like I said a bit earlier, we need to find ways of meeting human needs in a modern way so that we can have modernity. That's a great thing that we've invented as part of our civilization. And high grade our resources in a way that uses them for their highest utility. And we don't do that right now. Right now we have, like, commodities markets, and you can pretty much do whatever you want with any resource because we live in a free market society. And that's good. And we need, capitalism is good and free markets are good and all of that sort of stuff. But if we kind of look at long history, if we look at long time with a much broader perspective, we are going to look back on the last 100 years and question our intelligence with regards to how we've used some of these resources.
I want to return to something that you had just mentioned in that answer, and I wrote it down. I'm going to keep it a surprise for you because I want to get to just the moment in time where you decided to jump into Fifth World, and like you said, it started around the pandemic. It started on this one property. What was the decision for you personally to jump into entrepreneurship?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur since 2008. So Verge Permaculture was what I was doing prior to that. And I had a small consultancy as well. So that's when we were teaching permaculture. So I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. Maybe for that little period in time during the oil and gas industry, I wasn't. But,
Sure.
I grew up in my dad's business. Fifth World started because I wrote a précis to one of the co-founders of Ethereum, basically like stating how we could regenerate Earth's ecosystems in 10 years. And the premise was basically that if we had the resources, the coordination, the intelligence, the manpower of the U.S. military, we could actually, excuse me, we could heal Earth's ecosystems in a decade. Like when you look at how much resource and that the U.S. military has, then we don't have a knowledge problem. We know how to fix ecosystems. We know how to do it in efficient ways. We have a capital problem right now. Nature is not on the balance sheet in most companies, in most economies. And I just ran this experiment the other day. We're looking at starting a new product offering in 2026. They're called Miyawaki forests. They're little micro forests that you plant your full succession in one day, basically. And to plant a 5-acre, like a small 5-acre forest, it's like $500,000 to replant that forest in a way that's like biodiverse, going to be healthy. It's going to mimic a real forest. Now, if you think about what kind of value you'd get out of harvesting a 5-acre chunk of forest, we're probably talking about $10,000 at most, and those would be like really nice trees. And so it's a perfect example of the cost of, we only pay for the cost of extraction, not for the actual product itself. So we're paying for the chainsaws and the humans to cut it down, but not for the actual trees. And the tree in our current economic paradigm only has the value once it's dead. We don't attribute value to the tree when it's alive. So when I said we could heal Earth's ecosystems in 10 years, they said, write me a précis, which is like a story about how that would happen. And about a month later, there was money in my bank account, and Fifth World was starting. It was crazy, unbelievable.
So then what was with such a massive mission and such big ideas and things like that, how is it that you decided on what direction to go in? Like you said, there were a couple different, I guess, products you could say that you guys, or projects, so that you decided to make Fifth World around. So what went into deciding those things?
So we started with a venture studio, and one of the products that we built, which is not scaled, was what we call internally Fitbit for planet Earth. And so the idea being that humans are not inherently destructive, we just lack feedback. And if you gave the right feedback to individual land managers, 37% of planet Earth's surface is farmed right now, and it's not in regenerative ways, that people would start to shift their behaviors. And then if we could tie that into a smart contract on Ethereum or a layer 2, then we could incentivize landowners to make better decisions. Building a token is relatively easy. Even like we figured out how to sense any ecosystem on Earth. We can look at it over the last 6 years, whether it's been like the same way that this Whoop or a Fitbit will track your health over time. We can do that with our software. The hard part about a token play is you have to figure out who's going to buy them. And we're not interested in rug pulls or any of that kind of shady stuff. And so and also when we were building all of this stuff, it was during a pretty intense crypto winter. Fifth World started with a pretty strong crypto market, and then it kind of got cold for a while. And so the idea of launching something just didn't line up properly. And then through hundreds, like probably even maybe not 1,000, but hundreds of conversations through LinkedIn and various other industry people. Like that thing kept coming up that nature's just not on the balance sheet yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying with carbon credits and ESG and all of these other things. And so we started to our hypothesis basically formed that we're actually in the same place Elon was at in 2004. And so we need to find our Model S essentially, and connect what we do into a target market that can afford the work that we do, because we need to make regen cool. It needs to be something that it's not a sacrifice. You're not running away from one system out of fear to another one. It's like it's actually got gravity. It's like the Tesla is a better car. It drives. It's quieter. I just got one, and my gasoline cost has come down by a factor of almost 7. Just because it's so. I mean, I have a solar array on my house, and so I fuel my car by the sun.
Yeah.
And so I've made decisions to move to that technology because it's better than what I had before. And so working for individuals that want resilient food, energy, water, and the best shelter on earth, most healthiest, most comfortable, most enduring buildings is a better offer than what exists conventionally. And if you get enough people to do that, then you find opportunities to scale down the road. And so we're actually building regenerative farms for people. We're building garden systems and greenhouses. We're building water harvesting systems and drought-proof systems. Like we're looking at the property as an ecosystem and integrating nature-based solutions into them.
So something that comes to mind is part of the first paradigm that we had talked about at the beginning, and it's this idea that nature isn't factored in economically, and so if to the extent that I understand this like Fitbit angle, it seems like to me an individual, a population that would be very interested in a solution like this would be people that are economically interested in the health of their soil, which are farmers, which is the post that I saw that first introduced us. And so is there some connection between that market, farmers and things like that, and the idea that you're speaking to?
Yeah, ultimately the goal, like farmers are really struggling, especially in the U.S. right now with some of the policies that have been brought forth in the last 11 months. And they're actually struggling, in the whole Western world, unless they're highly subsidized. Excuse me. Farmers are struggling all over the world because their input costs are going up, their soils are depleting. They're in an interesting economic paradigm where they lend against their farm in order to buy all the expensive equipment and buy all the inputs. And so it's not an easy system to get out of. It's kind of like the company store model where in order to work in the mine, you have to buy all your equipment from the company store, and every month you get a little bit further behind in what you do. And so while the tool might help farmers, it was designed to help farmers to make better decisions about their landscapes. The goal behind it was to figure out how to create new revenue streams for these farmers so that they could, almost like bridge financing, so they could move to the new paradigm. That's the piece that needs to be unlocked. If we could figure out who would be interested in, and like, it's because it's not part of our culture, who owns the benefit of those nature-based solutions that the farmer is actively farming, and why would somebody pay for that? That's the piece that's really difficult in the tokenomics kind of equation.
Got it. And so so then the pivot to the current project that you guys put forward at the moment, which is building these, looking at the property as an ecosystem, as holistically came from this Model S piece, that making it cool, making it finding a market for it. So that all makes sense. Something that I want to return to that you spoke about before, and as I believe it relates to Fifth World, is this idea of Trojan horses. And so in this idea, of trying to get adoption of regen. I think Trojan horse is a big conversation as it comes to grid modification, renewable energy, and AI. So that's why I thought it was really interesting when you brought it up before our conversation. So what does that, what does the concept of Trojan horse mean to you? How does it relate to regen? Where are you seeing it now? Yeah, those types of things.
So we've talked a lot about kind of farming and soil and these things, but regen itself, we can kind of broadly define it as the activities that we engage in as humans with regards to whether they enhance or retract from our relationship with nature. And I would say that regen is generally a pro-development approach. It's pro-human, so it's not actually an environmental movement. It's a humanist movement, but it's saying right now, Earth is the only place we can live. If we want to be here in 7 generations from now, we have to start behaving differently. And we also know that we need money to live and all of these other things. And so within the current kind of economic paradigm, what are the types of things that we can Trojan horse into our kind of business as usual day to day to transform them from the inside out? And AI is a great one to think about. So right now, everybody's talking about the AI revolution and how much water it's going to need, how much power it's going to need in order to operate. And so I actually wrote a précis for a wealthy investor that you would know because they're talking about building a big AI data center, like 10 gigawatt plus, like massive. To put that in perspective, like the grid that powers Alberta, where I live, is 12 gigawatts. So it's a huge place. So one data center could double the power requirement of where I live.
Yeah.
And I looked at things like every city, pretty much in every kind of major city in Alberta where I live, produces enough stormwater, which is a problem, and it's a byproduct of poor urban design. And it creates problems, erosion problems in our rivers. It puts sediment into the rivers. It harms the fish. It creates it pulls asbestos and pollutants into the rivers. We don't really have good treatment solutions for stormwater generally. Like they exist, but generally they're not. There's not that many practiced. And so there's enough stormwater generated, for example, in the city of Edmonton, close to where I am, to produce enough water to cool this 10 gigawatt system. And you would end up with better health outcomes for the river because all the particles wouldn't end up there. We wouldn't be extracting finite clean water sources in order to cool the data center. And so that'd be an example of where we can kind of match negative externalities to like 2 negatives equals a positive. And so we don't actually have a water problem in the AI data center space. We actually have a cooling problem. And, humans have been figuring out cooling solutions for thousands of years. Literally, like when you want a new idea, go back into an old book and bring it forward again. And so I have it like 5 or 6 different cooling solutions that nobody that I can see is talking about right now that would transform the relationship that these data centers have with, I'll give you another one, like the city of Edmonton in the wintertime has enough heat demand. If you look at downtown Edmonton, you could heat the whole of downtown Edmonton with a district heating loop. So those are underground pipes delivering hot water directly from a data center. And so now you can create a positive relationship between the data center and the city. And so now people's hot showers and their space heating becomes an opportunity for the data center to be able to supply. And now the data center has a new revenue stream because now they're selling thermal energy, which is a waste product of their chips. And 1 watt of compute equals 1 watt of heat. And so we could look at that for the power requirements as well. Like imagine every data center now sets up an agrivoltaic system just on the peri-urban part of the city. And so we buy, 5,000 or 6,000 acres of land. We set up solar arrays. Solar is the software of electricity because it's so fast to deploy. And then we could regeneratively graze between those solar panels so we can actually produce a regenerative food source. Grazing, if it's set up properly, is a biodiversity sink, so it's good for biodiversity. And so now we can find ways, like where our economy really struggles is that we think in silos. And so we're just going to build a data center, we're going to plug it into the grid, we're going to plug it into the water grid, and we're going to do our thing. Those days are coming to an end. We're running out of water and we're running out of electricity. Alberta, where I'm from, just told all the data centers that are applying for power in our province that there's no more power. So I said our grid is 12 gigawatts. There's 20 gigawatts of data centers in the queue right now that can't develop because there's not enough generation capacity. So we're running out of the resources that we need to be able to think in silos. And so that opens up an opportunity for regen thinking, which is basically systems thinking, that allows us to kind of connect one problem set, one set of liabilities with another. On the surface, it just looks like we're problem solving, but we're actually Trojan horsing. If we're careful, we can Trojan horse regen solutions into these conventional businesses and completely transform our relationship with nature around us.
Well, so then, what are typically, I guess, the thinking in silos, the traditional way of going about things is one reason, but what are some other reasons that you find, some other direct oppositions? I don't know of people out there that are saying, well, I understand from what you just said, Rob, it sounds like, economically viable, like it makes sense, like all these things, but if there's somebody that disagrees, what are typically the arguments?
So the big argument, having run a business now for many years, is that if I'm a data center and I'm having to invest in or co-invest in a district heating loop that heats downtown Edmonton, I now have a dependency on the city. And now the city has a dependency on me. And so it adds operational complexity, it adds risk. And when you're thinking about how these hyperscalers think about risk, they don't have time. Like it's pretty crazy when you think about the depreciation rate on these chips. Like they last, 3 years. And so adding in the complexity of a district heating loop is going to dramatically change the unit economics of like that they get from speed. And so it's not just a matter of putting it into the next hyperscaling data center. Like it actually requires a bit of a societal mind shift as well. And so some of that stuff might have to happen from a policy level. There may be policy shifts that are required. I think that there probably are solutions that are less complex if we think about them. And so we'd have to actually kind of get in the same room with some of these hyperscalers and really understand their capital structure, their risk structure, and then look at opportunities through that lens as well, so that we're not adding a ton of operational complexity in order for them to get some of the benefits of this thinking. That would be probably one of the big pushbacks, I would say.
Got it. Thank you. Are there any other major, outside of building data centers and things like this, are there any other major Trojan horses that you're seeing at the moment?
I'm constantly thinking about these. One thing, this is not necessarily my thinking per se, but there was a book written back in the 90s, maybe the early 2000s, called Rewealth by Storm Cunningham. And he ran a brick factory in the US. And if you know how bricks are made, they basically extract soil, they press them into bricks, and they put them into a furnace. And so his brilliance came from the fact that a lot of the kind of brownfield sites that are polluted, you generally have two options to deal with those polluted sites. You either dig and dump, so you take it away and put it into a landfill, or you incinerate the soil. And he said, I already own an incineration business. I incinerate soil and make them into bricks. So he started setting up brick factories next to brownfield sites, would dig out the degraded soil, turn them into bricks and sell them, and then redevelop the property without the toxins. And so that kind of thinking is where we need to go as entrepreneurs. We need to find the win-wins where we can, again, he brought two domains together, like making bricks and soil remediation are generally two siloed businesses, but he saw an opportunity to marry the two together and make a ton more money. Like he became a really profitable developer, and he still got to sell bricks. And so I think if we start looking at our economy through that lens, we'll start finding opportunities where we can vertically integrate, in a sense, and solve multiple problems at the same time.
Yeah, I've heard of soil remediation also with hemp and certain kinds of mushroom. Is that something you've heard of?
Yeah, there's a few folks in the States that are pioneering that, and Paul Stamets is one of them. He wrote a book called, I think it's 5 Ways Mushrooms Can Save the World, or maybe it's 11 Ways, I can't remember, but it's many ways.
What are the
And
odds? It's a bunch of them.
he talks in that book about how some of those processes have actually been patented, which I think is interesting as well, because that process has probably been around for a billion years, and then we turn up and patent it and prevent people from actually doing it. So yeah, mushrooms are an amazing, like microremediation is an amazing technology, or biological process. And then different plants, are able to do different things in the soil for sure.
Yeah, we should bookmark that. Another high interest of mine. Two of my favorite questions to ask. The first one with Fifth World specifically, what is the biggest hurdle that you're facing at the moment, and how is it also an opportunity?
Um, I think right now the biggest hurdle, at least in North America, I can't speak for the US right now, but in Canada, there's a lot of uncertainty in Canada right now, with the tariffs and the various, like the relationship that we have with the United States. And so people are very cautious, kind of watching how things are going to unfold, which has meant that there's definitely a reduction in spending with regards to construction. That has been a challenge. I think the opportunity or the silver lining in all of that is that Canadians have realized, and I do think this is happening to some degree in the U.S., that supply chains are weak and they're subject to a lot of things that generally people don't have control over. So, whether it's your president making a decision that has, massive influence on the policies that happen up here. COVID was another great example of that, where we saw certain supply chains kind of dry up or stop. I think generally people are realizing that decentralized and autonomous systems are a good thing to own or a good thing to control, at least within certain domains. And I think long term that we're going to see more of that type of thinking. I mean, it ties nicely into Bitcoin and kind of some of these other decentralized movements that are happening on planet Earth right now. And it's just a matter of time before those start infiltrating into some of the other domains.
Well, with all this work to be done and all these ideas, I'm curious, what inspires you?
Nature. 4.2 billion years of research and development. All of the solutions exist in nature. We just have to have the humility to go out and spend time without our phones, observing how those natural processes occur and how to bring those concepts back into the way that we build our civilization.
Absolutely. Well, you're repping nature right now. I'm gonna go back to the color palette that you showed up with. So I appreciate that. I gotta get on that wave. Well, thank you, Rob, so much for your ideas. Thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to stay in touch. I think there's a lot more to unpack. I think we just, float along the surface with a lot of these things. But thank you for the work that you're doing. If anyone else is inspired to follow along with your journey, what's the best way to do that?
You can check us out at fifthworld.com, and over on LinkedIn, I post most days under Rob Avis.
Beautiful. Go do it. Rob, thank you so much. We'll
Thanks,
talk
Blake.
soon.
Yeah, talk soon.